In 2008, two guys couldn't pay their rent. So they blew up 3 air mattresses, charged strangers $80 a night to sleep on them, and called it a business. Every investor they pitched said no. One called it the worst idea I've ever heard. Today, that worst idea is worth over $100 billion. And it didn't just build a company, it changed how the entire world travels. But here's what nobody talks about. Airbnb almost died 3 times, and the moves they made to survive? They broke every rule in Silicon Valley. This is the real story of Airbnb. Right now, on any given night, over 4 million people are sleeping in someone else's home. Not a hotel, not a hostel, someone's actual home. That's the world Airbnb built. The company operates in over 220 countries. It has more rooms available than the top 5 hotel chains combined. And it was built not by hotel executives or real estate moguls, but by 2 broke designers who couldn't afford groceries. Brian Chesky and Gebbia didn't come from money. They didn't have connections on Sand Hill Road. They had a laptop, a credit card maxed to the limit, and an idea that sounded absolutely insane. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how they pulled it off. You'll see the near-death moments most people never hear about. You'll learn the counterintuitive strategies that turned 3 air mattresses into a global empire. And you might just rethink everything you know about building a business. But first, let's go back to where it all started. A cramped apartment, October 2007. San Francisco, 2007. Brian Chesky had just left his job as an industrial designer in Los Angeles. He moved to the city with big dreams and almost no money. Gebbia, his old college roommate from the Rhode Island School of Design, had an apartment but couldn't cover the rent alone. So Chesky moved in to designers' one apartment. A shared problem, rent was due. Their bank accounts were nearly empty. That month, a massive design conference, called the Industrial Designers Society of America Conference, was coming to San Francisco. Every hotel in the city was booked solid. Joe had an idea. What if they rented out space in their apartment to conference attendees? Not a spare bedroom, they didn't have one. Just floor space and air mattresses. They bought 3 air mattresses. Charged $80 a night, offered to throw in breakfast. They called it AirBed and breakfast. 3 guests showed up. A 30-year-old Indian man, a 45-year-old woman from Boston, a father from Utah, and here's the thing that nobody expected. They loved it, not just the cheap price. They loved meeting the founders. They loved the personal touch. The home-cooked breakfast, the local tips. Something real happened in that apartment, and Brian Chesky felt it immediately. He later said, "I remember thinking, this is actually kind of amazing. People trusted us. Complete strangers trusted us. That moment of human connection, stranger opening their door to stranger, that was the seed of everything. But turning that seed into a real company, that was going to be a war." Brian Chesky and Gebbia were excited. They had proof of concept, real guests, real money. They brought in a 3rd co-founder, Nathan Blecharczyk, a Harvard-educated engineer, to build the website. And in 2008, they launched AirBed and breakfast to the world. The response, silence. Almost nobody signed up, almost nobody booked. The website barely worked. They tried relaunching around the Democratic National Convention in Denver. Got some traction, a few $100s. Then the Republican National Convention, same play, a little more. But they were burning through money fast, credit cards maxed out. Nathan Blecharczyk actually quit at one point. He moved back to Boston, got a real job. The dream was on life support, and then 2008 hit. The financial crisis didn't just hurt Wall Street, it crushed consumer confidence everywhere. Nobody was taking vacations, nobody was spending money they didn't have to. The worst possible moment to launch a travel startup, they kept pitching investors. 7 of Silicon Valley's top venture capitalists passed. One wrote them an email that's now legendary in startup circles, calling the idea fundamentally flawed. Another told them, politely, that people would never trust strangers in their homes. Fred Wilson, the legendary VC from Union Square Ventures, later admitted it was one of his biggest misses. He passed. They were running on fumes. And that's when they did something completely ridiculous. They made cereal. Not metaphorical cereal, actual cereal. With the 2008 presidential election heating up, they designed a custom cereal boxes. Obama's, the cereal of change, and Captain McCain's, a maverick in every box. They ordered 1,000 boxes, filled them by hand, and sold them for $40 each at the Democratic National Convention. It was pure hustle, and it worked. They made $30,000 in cereal sales. Enough to keep the lights on, enough to survive a little longer. Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, the most famous startup accelerator in the world, later said when he heard about the cereal, he was simultaneously horrified and impressed. Anyone who can do that, he said, can do anything, which is exactly why Y Combinator changed everything. Early 2009, Airbnb, they'd shortened the name by now, applied to Y Combinator. Paul Graham's accelerator had launched Dropbox, Reddit, and dozens of other companies. Getting in was like getting into Harvard for startups. They almost didn't make it. Graham initially thought the idea was too niche, too weird. But something about these founders, their raw determination, the cereal boxes, the willingness to do whatever it took, made him say yes. They got in, and Y Combinator gave them something more valuable than money. They gave them Paul Graham. Graham looked at their numbers and asked a simple question. Where are your users? New York, they said. He said, then why are you still in San Francisco? Go to New York, meet your users. Sleep on their couches if you have to, so they did. Chesky moved to New York. He met every host personally. He booked stays in apartments. He observed what worked and what didn't. And he noticed something critical: the photos were terrible. Hosts were uploading blurry, dark, amateur photos of their listings. Nobody wanted to book a place that looked like a crime scene. So Chesky and Gebbia did something that made zero business sense. They rented a camera, and they personally went door to door, apartment to apartment, taking professional photos of New York listings themselves. This was not scalable. Two founders manually photographing strangers' apartments, one by one, but bookings doubled, then tripled. Paul Graham would later call this the perfect example of doing things that don't scale, the counterintuitive startup advice that became one of his most famous essays. The idea in the early days: do things manually, do things that can't scale. Because that's how you figure out what actually works. Airbnb had cracked it, but their real rocket fuel was about to come from an unexpected place. By mid-2009, momentum was building. Sequoia Capital, the firm that backed Google and Apple, led a $600,000 seed round into Airbnb. Suddenly, they had real money, real credibility, and a very aggressive growth plan. Their strategy was smart and a little ruthless. They noticed that Craigslist, the old-school classifieds website, was where most people listed short-term rentals at the time. Millions of potential hosts and guests were already there. So Airbnb built a system that allowed hosts to cross-post their Airbnb listings directly to Craigslist with one click. It was a form of growth hacking that filled Airbnb's platform with listings almost overnight. They also integrated a message that linked back to Airbnb, so every person who saw a listing on Craigslist got exposed to the Airbnb brand. It was clever, it was aggressive, and it worked. By 2010, Airbnb had 700,000 listings and had booked over 1 million nights. That same year, Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most powerful VC firms in the world, led a $7.2 million Series A round. By 2011, a $112 million Series B at a $1.3 billion valuation. In 3 years, they went from sleeping on air mattresses to being a unicorn. They expanded to Europe aggressively, acquired Akoleo in Germany, set up offices in London, Paris, Hamburg. And then they did something unusual for a startup. They invested heavily in design. Not just the app design, the entire experience design. Chesky and Gebbia, both designers at their core, believed the product had to feel human, warm, trustworthy, every font choice, every color, every word on the homepage. They obsessed over it and users felt the difference. By 2012, the company was facilitating 10 million nights booked. By 2014, 100 million. By 2016, they crossed 200 million. The growth curve wasn't just impressive, it was historic. So how does Airbnb actually make money? The model is elegantly simple. Every time a booking happens on the platform, Airbnb takes a cut. Guests typically pay a service fee of around 14%. Hosts pay a separate service fee of around 3%. So on a $200 per night booking, Airbnb might collect $34. Multiply that by millions of bookings every single night, and you start to see the scale in 2019. Before the pandemic, Airbnb processed $38 billion in gross booking value. Their revenue that year was $4.8 billion. They launched Airbnb Experiences in 2016, allowing locals to offer activities, tour, and events to travelers. A new revenue stream, they moved into Airbnb for Work, targeting corporate travel. Airbnb Plus for premium listings. They were building a hospitality ecosystem, not just a listings platform. And in 2020, they were preparing to go public. The timing couldn't have been worse. March 2020, the world stops. A global pandemic shuts down travel overnight. In February 2020, Airbnb was valued at $31 billion. They had filed confidentially for an IPO, then COVID-19 hit. Within weeks, cancellations flooded in, billions of dollars in refunds went out the door. Revenue dropped by 70% in a matter of weeks. The IPO was shelved, employees panicked, and Airbnb was burning through cash fast. Chesky later said this was the lowest moment in the company's history. Worse than 2008, worse than the early rejections. He had to lay off 1,900 employees, about 25% of the company, in a single day. He personally called it the most painful decision of his life. But what happened next is where the Airbnb story becomes something different, something that business schools will study for decades. Instead of waiting for travel to come back, Chesky asked a different question: where can people go? Americans couldn't fly overseas, but they could drive. They could escape to a cabin in the mountains, a lake house a few hours away, a farm in rural Vermont. Airbnb pivoted to local and rural travel. Fast, they promoted nearby stays, weekend getaways, short drives, not long flights. And something unexpected happened. People were now working remotely. Airbnb saw a new use case emerge in real time: long-term stays. Digital nomads, people booking Airbnbs for a month, not a weekend. The average length of stay on Airbnb jumped significantly during 2020. Revenue started recovering. By the end of 2020, something no one expected was about to happen. December 10, 2020, 9 months after the world shut down, Airbnb went public. They priced shares at $68. On the first day of trading, the stock opened at $146. By the end of that day, Airbnb's market cap hit $100 billion. Brian Chesky, the guy who once couldn't pay rent, was now a billionaire many times over. Gebbia, Nathan Blecharczyk, all three founders became some of the wealthiest people in the world. And here's the kicker, they went public in the same year they almost died. In the same year, they laid off a quarter of their workforce. In the same year travel collapsed. That's not just resilience. That's something else entirely. But the Airbnb story is not all triumph, not even close. As the platform grew, so did the problems. In cities like New York, San Francisco, Barcelona, and Amsterdam, residents began to notice something. Long-term rental apartments were disappearing from the market. Landlords could make more money listing on Airbnb than renting to locals. Rents started spiking, neighborhood character started changing. Local governments pushed back hard. Barcelona began finding illegal Airbnb listings. New York passed some of the strictest short-term rental regulations in the world in 2023, essentially banning most Airbnb-style listings in the city. Airbnb fought back, lobbied, negotiated, but the tension between the platform's growth and urban housing affordability remains one of the most debated issues in modern city planning. In 2019, a hidden camera was found in an Airbnb property in Florida. Then another in Ireland, then several more. A mass shooting at a Halloween party hosted at an Airbnb property in California killed 5 people. The backlash was severe. Airbnb responded by banning party houses. They launched a 24/7 safety line. Enhanced verification for hosts, but the trust issue, the very thing that made Airbnb possible in the first place, had been shaken. A Harvard Business School study found that guests with distinctively black names were significantly less likely to be accepted by hosts compared to guests with white-sounding names. Airbnb was publicly embarrassed. They launched Project Lighthouse, an internal investigation into discrimination on the platform. They introduced policies to limit hosts' ability to see guest photos before accepting bookings. It helped, but critics argued it didn't go far enough. Chesky addressed many of these issues publicly. He acknowledged failures. He made commitments. Whether Airbnb has done enough on housing, safety, and discrimination remains an open and important debate. In 2007, Brian Chesky and Gebbia blew up 3 air mattresses. They didn't have a business plan. They didn't have money. They didn't have connections. They had a problem and the audacity to solve it. They were rejected by every major investor. They sold cereal to stay alive. They photographed strangers' apartments by hand. And somewhere in all that desperate, unscalable, ridiculous hustle, they built the foundation for a $100 billion company. Today, Airbnb has over 7 million listings in 220 countries. It has created a meaningful secondary income stream for millions of everyday people. It has changed the meaning of travel, from a transaction into something more like a human connection. The 3 air mattresses are long gone, but what they represent, the idea that an ordinary problem, solved with extraordinary persistence, can change the world, that's permanent. And maybe that's the most important thing about the Airbnb story. It didn't take a genius. It took 2 designers who couldn't pay rent, 1 engineer who almost quit, and the absolute refusal to give up. Here's a question to sit with. If Brian Chesky had taken a safe job in 2007 instead of blowing up those air mattresses, what billion-dollar idea is sitting in your life right now, disguised as a problem you're trying to ignore? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. If this story hit different for you, share it with 1 person who needs to hear it. That's how these stories spread. And if you want to go deeper, next up, we're covering the story of another company that turned a near bankruptcy into one of the greatest corporate comebacks in American history. You're not going to want to miss it. Subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll see you in the next one.